I'm great. Thanks for having me. Um, that in itself would take probably the whole sit down. Exposed to so much as a kid. Actually, I was telling a friend of mine last night. My friend was telling me the story of the first time he ever heard like Barry White, and he was 16. And I was like, wow, like I never had an experience like that with one of the older classic artists because I was raised around it. I never had like a first memory with Aretha Franklin. I never had like a first memory with, Earth, Wind and Fire, or even like Mozart and Debussy and Tchaikovsky, like the more classical, because it was just always around. Like I never had a first Beatles experience because it was always playing in the house as a kid. And so in some ways I feel like I'm lucky because I had that exposure and experience growing up, but I also feel like I was robbed of the experience to discover it on my own, almost. But I did get to have that oh my god moment with newer bands like Radiohead and Bright Eyes. Yeah, I think it first started with Motley Crue, and a boy who introduced me to Motley Crue was my first love, and that set me on this path of Van Halen and Def Leppard and Poison and bands in that category. And then over the span of that next year, I started discovering the grungier bands on my own: Pixies, Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, Interpol. And those are a lot of the bands that I'm really taking from with my newer stuff. But I think my first album that I ever bought, at least on wax, like my first vinyl I ever bought, was Too Fast for Love. The emo stuff that I discovered has actually been more recently. Like in the last few months, I've started listening to bands like Brand New. And that's more like, and Built to Spill, kind of like the older classical, like not classical, but classic Midwest emo, like the originals. No, other than that one boy who showed me Motley Crue. I don't know if I'd ever be able to describe why. It's just, it does something to my brain and my heart and my soul that's just like everything I want from music. Well, it's I also have some friends that I've gotten into Radiohead, and I think that there's a way to go about it when introducing someone to kind of like taper them into it. Taper's usually off, but like going into it, kind of like with Modest Mouse, you don't want to start someone off with Guilty Cocker Spaniels. You got to ease them into it with like Float On and like The World at Large and more digestible things.
Yeah.
And so thankfully I was introduced the correct way with the Bends at OK Computer, and those are like my top two. And then those helped me kind of just fall so in love with it and get into that level of understanding to where like by the time I did get to Kid A and the weirder ones, then I was like, okay, cool. Like I can dig this. The bands, I don't know how much you know of like the B-sides and stuff, but there is one very special one that is How Can You Be Sure? And I'm pretty sure it's the B-side to it's Fake Plastic Trees, right? That's the B-side.
Definitely.
There's some really special.
There's some gems there. Okay.
It was in an acting class, and that was like a safer environment, I think, for me to try that out because that was a class that we all did just the weirdest things. And there was plenty of things that are cringeworthy and plenty of things that are like, I don't want to remember that tomorrow. And so that's like it's like a safer place to try out performing.
Do a lot of people
too many things about it that were right, and I couldn't like deny it anymore. Once I really started to fall in love with performing, because like being in love with songwriting has always been there, but now I'm getting a taste for performing, and oh my god, I love it. And then I'm getting a taste for being in the studio and recording, and oh my god, I love it. And there's so many different parts of being a musician that are all very different. People are like, what do you like more, the studio or the stage or the writing? And I love them all for different reasons and differently, not one more than the other. But there's just so many things about it it's just so right that I couldn't not. And it was more of a duo, and I called it a band because I didn't know that a duo was like a thing. Band is usually, is it 3 or 4 or more?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just, I knew I couldn't do it alone, or I didn't feel as though I could do it alone. And it was someone that I trusted and had been doing it a lot longer than me. And so I kind of had a safety net with me on stage. And I kind of was like, following his lead and learning like soaking as much in as I can. Like my brain was a sponge, and I was like, okay, so this is the method for writing, and this is how you perform, and this is how. And I was really just like shadowing him essentially, and that was what I wanted. I wanted to kind of like sit back and be like, I'll do the backup harmonies and backup vocals, and let me watch you and let me learn how to do this. And then, you know, by the time I recorded Wilted and started performing on my own and doing my own things, I felt more ready.
Like 85 or something.
You know, it's cool because that's one of the only places left on the Sunset Strip that still has the history of it. You know, they're tearing down the Viper Room and they repainted the Roxy, and it's not the same as it was in at least the stuff that I read about. I grew up reading the Heroin Diaries and Tattoos and Tequila and The Dirt, and I'm like, this is what it should be. And the Rainbow is the only place there that still is like that. It was a really great learning experience. I take every performance I have as a opportunity to learn and grow. Even especially now, because I've got like this fantastic band with me, and I'm like learning a lot from them. And they're also older than me, and they've been doing this for like 15 years. They all met at MI, and they've been playing together. And so I'm like the newbie. And I kind of just watch them on stage and learn from them. And if I'm nervous, they give me pep talks. And if we don't get enough time to sound check, then we figure it out. And if a microphone goes out because I screamed too loud, we figure it out. Okay, me and my bassist are going to switch. And, you know, like we just handle things as they come. And so every single time I've been on stage, there's been something that's happened that I can learn from. Just LA stuff. The place I still play at Hotel Cafe when they have me. It's really nice, and I always had a good time at Good Times in Davy Wayne's.
Love that spot.
Obviously, pretty much anything the Houston Brothers create is a fantastic band. Well, I recorded all of my demos out here in LA, and then it's just me and an engineer. And my manager had called the guys from Manchester Orchestra, who I really look up to, and asked if they would work with me, and they said yes.
Amazing.
So I sent them all my demos, and a few weeks later I flew out to Georgia, and I ended up staying for about 2.5 weeks. We recorded the entire album in 2.5 weeks. And then I got back to LA. I played it for, you know, my manager and my publicist, and then they booked a meeting with Monty in upstate New York, who's my record exec from Republic, and we flew out, and I sat with him, and I had this disc. And I was like, well, do you want to hear the ones I think are singles? Or he's like, no, I want to hear all of it. And I was like, you want to hear the entire of it? Yeah. I was so proud of this record. And it was a story. Yeah. You know, each song, it tells a story. By the time you reach the end of it, it's a entire movie almost. And I was very proud of it. I didn't know that I could ever create something like that. And the fact that I was able to do it with people that I really admire and look up to was just a blessing. And so I'm just sitting there, and I don't know if he'll like it. I don't know if that's something that the stuff that I'm making is something that bigger labels enjoy. I didn't know. And
because it's a concept record.
It's a concept, but it's also like alternative folk. And, you know, a lot of major labels don't do that. I don't know if they do genres like that for the most part. It's mostly pop.
Yeah.
The whole thing. And then, at the end of it, he was like, all right, cool. Like,
let's go.
We want to work with you if you want to work with us. And I was like, okay. So,
it's funny because a lot of bands have to
there's kind of a big difference between the way they produce, because I'm in the studio with Andy and Rob, and I get to be there throughout the entire process. We'll have some days that are, you know, 10 or more hours long, and I'm watching how they create, and I'm watching how they do all the things, and I'm trying to take in as much as I can, because again, I want to learn, you know, watching whoever it is, if it's a bandmate, if it's a friend, if it's someone I admire on an actual stage. I want to see Bright Eyes, and I'm like studying Conor Oberst, like what are the moves he's doing right now? I want to, you know, mimic that. Yeah. And so just like watching them being like, because I want to learn how to do this on my own. I want to learn how to produce. And with Butch, it was completely different, because I would show up, I'd play the song for him, and I'd be like, this is what I got so far. I don't know if you want to rewrite the chorus, if you want to add a bridge, if you want to keep it as is or whatever, but like, this is what I'm coming up with. And these are some references. Like, I kind of like this Interpol song, and I kind of like this Audio Slave song, and let me know if we can maybe like combine the two and give those elements, whatever. And Butch is like, okay, got it. Come back tomorrow. And I'm there for like maybe like 20 minutes. And then I come back the next day and the track's built, drawn, everything is just done.
By the way,
Relative term.
True.
I'm about to go on tour with Silver Sun fucking Pickups.
Amazing.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm stoked.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, it's not about numbers for me.
Yeah, true.
I can necessarily help people with mental health issues because I'm not a medical professional. I'm fortunate enough to be able to have a therapist that I really like, and it took me 10 years to find him, but I have one that I like, and I have ways to keep myself healthy and to work at it one day at a time. But I'm by no means
An expert.
Yeah, like I can't cure anything. I mean, there's little tidbits I can get 15 minutes of direct sunlight a day. Like that's something, and you know, there's little tidbits that I can give out, stuff that's helped me. But what works for me may not work for another person, and that's why, you know, if the issues are bad enough, you should seek help.
Yeah, no question.
Personally, hearing music that makes me feel understood and less alone helps.
Definitely.
That's one of the many moving parts of good mental health for me.
For sure.
It's not just music. It's a lot of other things, but feeling understood, not feeling alone is a big part of it.
For sure, I'm sure.
And I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. And he's like, no, you should. And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to forget the lyrics. And he's like, just do it. It's fine. And I get on stage and I forget all of the lyrics. I was like, cool, I'm never doing that again.
Well, you did that to B. How'd you meet the guys in Cheap Trick?
I don't know them at all. They saw me sitting side stage and I had whipped off my shirt from side stage. It was just friends like, he's calling you up there. I was like, no, he's not. She's like, he's calling you up there. And I was like, all right. So I ran out on stage without a shirt and I like swung it around. And then I was like, he like bowed at me and then I bowed back and I ran back to the side of stage. And then
we're talking about Robin Zander,
it was him and the singer. And and then they had a couple other people come on stage and sing, and then they brought me back out and had me sing one of their songs. It depends. Like it depends on the size. Like if I'm about to go and do an acoustic show, say tonight, it's going to be fine because I've already done a million. So like a show in front of like 30, 50 people, like I don't get nervous about that. But then, you know, I'll move to a 200-seater, and then I'll get nervous the first 3 times, and then I'll do like a 1,000-seater, and then I get nervous the first few times. Now, like when I go out and there's 1,000 people, it's not as not nervous. Probably means you don't care, and if you don't care, it means you either need a bigger stage or you should do something else.
That's true.
In love with this style, but Lighthouse was actually less grunge oriented and more like. Well, how it came about was I actually met Butch, like I think it was probably 2016. We met and became friends, and we had talked for like 5 years about like doing music loosely here and there. We'd like talk about it, and nothing ever happened, and because he's in very high demand. And I was more so a fan of like his Stay Gold record, really just incredible. And he had me do some backup vocals and some speaking on one of his concept records a few years ago. And then he called me back into the studio like a year later and was like, we want to do some backup vocals for this song my friend's doing. It's going to be in an indie movie and da-da-da. I didn't really know anything about it. Turns out it was Peanut Butter Falcon.
Huge.
And I was like, oh, cool. And so we had been in the studio together. We'd done things like that, but it was never anything like for my music. And then when this came about, he's friends with Mike McCready. So he asked Mike to play on it. And I guess he said yes. I wasn't there for it, so I still haven't met Mike. But I'm sure I have a lot of gratitude for him. Very, very similar. So they're all still folk songs. Like if you break down Lighthouse and you play it on just acoustic guitar, it's folk. Like weird, gory, like horror movie type dreams, which I love, or they're like, I don't know, like animals. Like I dream about animals a lot. There are a lot of crossovers and similarities between the two worlds. Self-expression is one of the main similarities with it. But I see music as more of who I am. And it's more of like a soul connection. And my love for fashion is more human oriented, you know, less soul, more human. But there's a lot of brands and designers that I really just resonate with, Vivienne Westwood being one of them. Rest in peace. I don't know if there's a designer that's more punk rock than her.
Totally.
Self-expression and not giving a fuck and being exactly who you are, and bending rules, and she's just completely different things. I don't really ever compare them. Art's art, though.
Yeah.
Like if I get to work with a cool designer that truly loves the art of it and is really expressing themselves and really, and they need assistance with putting that art on display, which is like, I'll be the mannequin and put your art on me, and I get to show the world what you want to create. Like I can't get enough of Gaultier. I did walk for Gaultier for his final show as a designer, but the more the better. I love that brand. I love that designer. Galliano, Vivienne Westwood, obviously.
Tell me about your band and tell me about the tour life for you now.
They are my family, and
they all went to.
Yeah, they really look out for me, and we have an actual like friendship. It doesn't feel like we're coworkers. It feels like home when we're on the road. And actually, there was this really cool moment in the van on this last tour with the Revivalists. I was sitting behind my guitar player, and his name's Michael, and he just said something along the lines of like, "Hey guys, like I just wanted to say like thanks, and I've always wanted to do this." And my drummer in the front said something like, "What? Like listen to Leonard Skinner or something like that." And he's like, "No, like this, like just this." And there was this moment where we were all like, "Oh, like same, dude!" Like because we all come from different cities and different backgrounds and different ages. But at one point, we were all in 8th grade listening to AC/DC, and we're like, "This is what I want to do." And I grew up, and here we are, like in a band with really cool fellows, and we have a good time, and we laugh a lot, and we're doing what we love. And I have an album, and I would like to release it.
Awesome.
The next move would be releasing the title track, and I just got the final mix back yesterday. I had like one little note, and then we're set.
Are you passionate about it?
It depends on the role, and it depends on the location.
For sure. Well,
that was great. I did 2 shows in November at the Troubadour. That was fantastic. The first one was with the Courteeners, and the second one was with a friend of mine, Royal and the Serpent. And we start in Alabama. I think we're hitting Cincinnati. There's like a couple Midwest spots, but it's mostly the South, like NOLA and Texas. There's like 5 Texas states.
Okay. Is there a favorite?
Wide Awake It's Morning by Bright Eyes. The Bends, Radiohead. Means Everything to Nothing, Manchester Orchestra. Midnight Organ Fight, Frightened Rabbit. And